7 days since I saw my sister, and sickness has entered into me. A young man in Egypt wrote those words 3,000 years ago. How did the ancient Egyptians fall in love? They did not do it in a temple. No priests, no altars, no sacred vows spoken before a god. Love in ancient Egypt was never a ceremony. It was a private matter, tender, sometimes messy, and often unexpectedly funny, and it was recorded. To hear it in their own voices, we begin in a village called Deir el-Medina, a settlement of artisans on the west bank of the Nile, where, on scraps of pottery and cracked papyrus, young men and women left behind their sleepless nights, their small teasings, and the exact shape of what it felt like to be in love. The scene is Egypt during what modern scholars call the New Kingdom, the era of Ramses, of the Valley of the Kings, of pharaohs whose names still echo through the temples they built. But the story of love does not live in the temples. It lives on a narrow street of mud brick houses, tucked into a fold of the desert cliffs above Thebes. The village is Deir el-Medina. For nearly 5 centuries, the artisans who carved the royal tombs lived here, sculptors, painters, and scribes. Their houses stood close together, walled off from the sand. Their days were spent underground, chiseling the walls of the afterlife. Their evenings were their own. And in those evenings, they wrote. They wrote on strips of papyrus. They wrote on the smooth backs of broken pottery jars. They wrote on flakes of limestone the size of a hand, the scratch paper of the ancient world. They wrote receipts. They wrote lawsuits. They wrote wills. And they wrote love poems. Roughly 60 of those poems survive today, collected on 4 manuscripts held today in Dublin, London, Turin, and Cairo. Together, they are the reason we can hear, across 3,000 years, what love sounded like in ancient Egypt. The most complete of the 4 is a papyrus, now kept in Dublin, the papyrus Chester Beatty one. On the back of its long scroll, a scribe of the 20th dynasty copied down a cycle of 7 stanzas titled The Great Entertainment. In it, a young man and a young woman take turns. Neither knows what the other is thinking. Neither can bring themselves to speak first. My love is one and only, the man says, without peer, lovely above all Egypt's lovely girls. The girl, meanwhile, aches from a distance. He knows nothing, she whispers, of my desire to embrace him. Throughout the poems, the lovers address each other as brother and sister, Sen and Sinet in ancient Egyptian. This is a language of endearment, not of family. It was the most tender word the poets could find for the person closest to them. Early Egyptologists, reading these poems for the first time, sometimes mistook the language for something literal, assuming that ordinary Egyptians married their siblings. They did not. The convention is poetic. The intimacy is the point. What the poems return to again and again is love as a physical illness. 7 days since I saw my sister, one song says, and sickness has entered into me. My limbs have grown heavy. My body has forsaken me. When the chief physicians come to me, my heart finds no relief in their remedies. Being a brother is better for me than any medicine. Sometimes the tone is desperate. Sometimes it is playful, even funny. There is a whole genre of poems in which the young lover imagines being transformed into small, everyday objects just to be close to the beloved. The mirror she looks into, the garment she wears, the water that washes her body, the ring on her finger. One of them ends with the young man half joking, I wish I were your sandal that you would step on me. Others are darker. The girl's mother catches wind of the affair. She forbids the meeting. The girl protests quietly to herself. Mother is right in charging him thus. Give up seeing her. It pains my heart to think of him. I am possessed by love of him, longing, silence, small acts of resistance. These are the emotions the poems document, not invented, but recorded in the careful hand of scribes who thought some feelings were worth preserving. What happened when the poems turned into something more? In ancient Egypt, love did not become marriage through a temple. It became marriage through a household. There was no priest, no altar, no exchange of sacred vows. No official state registry has ever been found. Instead, the moment of marriage was practical and public. A woman gathered her belongings, left her parents' house, and moved into the house of the man she loved. That was the wedding. Before the moving day, there was often an exchange the Egyptians called gait, the carrying of a bundle. The groom carried goods and provisions to the bride's family. This was followed, in the phrase of the New Kingdom scribes, by the making of a wife. The groom also gave the bride a personal gift on the day itself, called nektu in ancient Egyptian, usually jewelry or perfume or fine cloth. It became her property alone, not her father's, not her husband's, hers. For all but the very poorest, the marriage was written down on a papyrus contract in front of witnesses. The contract listed the bride's dowry, item by item, and pledged a portion of the husband's wealth as protection if the marriage ever ended. If it ended, the woman kept her belongings, kept her share, and importantly, kept her children. She also kept her title, Nebet Per, Lady of the House. Non-royal marriages were monogamous. The Greek historian Herodotus, visiting Egypt centuries later, would note it with mild surprise, each Egyptian taking to himself, like the Greeks, a single wife. The census documents from Deir el-Medina, dry lists of who lived where, confirm what the poets already sang about. One man, one woman, one household. Above all this, there were the gods. The goddess of love was Hathor, the Golden One, whose great temple at Dendera drew pilgrims from across the country. She was the goddess of beauty, of music, of dance, of joy. In the love poems, when the lovers pray, it is to her. It is her name they invoke when they beg the beloved to return. Her sacred instrument was the sistrum, a rattle of bronze and beads, and its bright rippling sound was, in the Egyptian imagination, the sound of love coming back. In the home itself, another god watched over the couple. Bes, a small, dwarfed, mischievous deity, protected the marriage bed, the pregnant wife, the newborn child. He was not solemn. He was not distant. He danced on the walls of the bedroom, on the sides of cosmetic jars, on the handles of mirrors. Real people lived within all of this, and in the wills and contracts of Deir el-Medina, we know some of their names. A woman named Naunacht married Kenhi Kopsef, the head scribe of the village, when she was around 12 years old and he was in his 50s, a gap that was legal and known, but even then unusual enough to be recorded. When he died, she married again, this time to a workman named Khaem Nun. Her will, which survives on papyrus, records her careful decisions about which of her children would inherit what an ordinary woman, exercising ordinary power over the ordinary business of a life. And when they died, the Egyptians believed the marriage did not end. A faithful husband, a faithful wife, would meet again in the field of reeds, the Egyptian afterlife, and continue what they had begun. What all of this reveals, the poems, the contracts, the goddess with her rattle, the moving in day, is a civilization that took love seriously and yet did not weigh it down. Love in ancient Egypt was not sanctified in a temple. It did not require a god's blessing. It was made real by the small acts that made a life together. The carrying of a bundle across the village, the writing of a contract, the giving of a mirror and a perfume, the moving of a woman's belongings from one door to another. And underneath the practical arrangements, there was something the papyri capture almost by accident. The ordinary emotional experience of loving another person, the sleepless nights, the mother's disapproval, the wish to become the sandal on the beloved's foot, the 7 days that felt like a lifetime. The scribes of Deir el-Medina left us their tools, their houses, their tombs, but they also left us their longing. And in doing so, they left us the rarest gift a civilization can pass down. Not only what they built, but what they felt. The young man of the Chester Beatty papyrus had no way of knowing that his complaint, his heaviness of limb, his ache of 7 days, would be read in a language he never spoke on the other side of the world 3,000 years after his death. And yet, here it is, still legible, still recognizable, still love. You've been watching Kemet Chronicles.